All right, everybody, another box, another disappointment. Time to open some more Dust Till Dawn. And today I want to talk about my thoughts on draft and fab, just in general. Uh, I don't really enjoy fab draft too much, to be honest. I first will say that draft is my favorite format in Magic. It is what I predominantly played back when I used to play Magic a ton. I would cube all the time. I do all the standard sets as they come out. My friends would do flashback drafts at their house sometimes. I love draft. It's what I play. Oh, right. I gotta figure out pack maintenance. Foil here, this here, and I guess I'll do the angels here and put big hits here. Okay. Figured it out. I'm starting to get better at this. And I remember to click my focus button before I started the video. We're learning. I'm capable of thought. All right, back to the topic at hand. So yeah, don't really enjoy fab draft too much. Now, first, I want to talk about some positives before I get into why I don't like fab draft. I do think that draft has gotten much better over the time I've been playing fab. I think that there's been a lot of pretty big improvements. I think that... check my notes here. I think that Helios Miter was, and like Phoenix Flame, like the whole concept of putting tokens in the packs to like make it so you don't need to physically draft as many cards was a big improvement to draft. I thought that was like a net positive for draft. I really liked that. And I really liked the concept of, and execution. Like I really liked the 6 heroes in the last set. I thought that helped with a problem that I'm going to be talking about later in this, of kind of creating archetypes. It felt like a problem that I had in the past was, wow. Sheesh. I'm doing this for you, Julian. One of my viewers said that he only listens to these. I got an extended art Dyadic Carapace. Nice. Of course, not card I'm actually looking for. You know, it's unlucky. Still looking for the extended art heralds, the chest piece, and the helmet, but I will take the money and not complain. Anywho, where was I? I was talking about archetypes. So one of the problems I've had in the past with draft and fab was it felt like once I drafted a hero a couple times, every other time I draft that hero, it felt the same. It was everything kind of gets very samey after a while. It's like every Phi deck feels like every other Phi deck. It's not like things are changing between drafts, really. It's like, okay, once I identify that I'm Phi, I just draft the same cards more or less every time. And that can get pretty boring. I really enjoy how in Magic it felt like my decks could be different from draft to draft, even if I'm drafting very similar decks. Like, if I draft red-black 3 times in a row, one time I might have red-black sacrifice, the next time it might be red-black discard, and then the next time it might just be red-black good stuff where I just have some, like, Doom Blades and burn spells with some value ETB creatures or something. So, like, each time it can be very different. But that doesn't feel like that's the case a lot of times in Fab Draft. The 6 heroes, I felt like was a great step to fixing that, because I could be one of 2 ninjas in the pod, and, I mean, didn't play out this way, it was just always correct to be Benji, pretty much, but if I was a ninja in the pod, I could be Benji and the other one was Katsu, and then we're actually fighting over different cards sometimes. Again, not how that necessarily always played out, but I'm using that at... Okay, just a second Dyadic Carapace. Great box. Interrupting my point, though. I'm so bad at doing this, of having the conscious flow of thought while opening packs. Just keeping my thought when I get interrupted. So yeah, that didn't always play out that way, because in other sets... So, like, in this set, a lot of the heroes were still fighting over the same cards, but a good example of that actually working would be, like, Azuri versus Arachne. Arachne wants far more of the go-again, what are they called? Stealth cards. You know, you just want more stealth cards. Whereas Azuri, you're fine taking worse stealth cards because you're just trying to bottom them, and then as well you're looking for like things to cheat into play, and you might not be fighting over people at the table for some of those cheat into play cards because they're like only good for your deck potentially. So I thought the 6 hero thing was a step in the right direction for solving that problem, but didn't necessarily go far enough. I really wish we just kept with things being divisible by 4. I really don't like the 3 hero thing. It feels like it leads... I think there's like intentions there for it to work a certain way, and then just in practice it doesn't work that way. A lot of the problems with draft and fab just all boil down to it being correct to force, and then the problems with fab draft just all point into that direction. Let me see if I missed anything before I move on to the negatives. Which was divisible by 4. Oh, the other thing that I'm really happy to see, which is not really related necessarily to specifically the actual drafting of the game, but I'm really happy to see that we're now moving to draft not being the opener for events. I really hated opening an event with draft. It was... I've had multiple negative experiences now of the event opening with draft, and just other people in the pod just creating a negative play experience for everyone else, and me usually getting the short end of that stick. I just realized I put a foil majestic in that pile. Oops. I'll give 2 different stories. I have other less cursed things, but these are 2 very cursed things that happened. At Worlds last year, when I sat down to do my deck registration, like, you know, you're like writing down all the cards that you drafted or whatever, or you swap with a person to write down their cards. I don't remember exactly which one of the 2 it was at Worlds. I sit down, and guy next to me asks, "Hey, is Asvalai good?" And I'm like, what? I took these checklist cards, but I don't actually know what these dragons do. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, yeah, it's my first time drafting this set. And I'm just sitting here like, I just didn't even answer him. I was like, I was about to tilt off the face of the earth. It's the flipping, I actually need this card, flipping World Championships, and I'm sitting next to someone that's literally never touched the set before. Okay. And another thing that happened to me, which that one didn't negatively impact me because that guy was not in my pod, thankfully. At Nationals last year, the event starts with them doing the players meeting and double checking that everyone is here so that they don't have any no-shows to the draft. Then they start seeding for drafts, and of course, I have a no-show to my draft pod. Someone showed up to the player meeting, but not to the draft like 10 minutes later. Okay, so I have a 7-man pod. That's not the end of the world, but it's not great. Got a cold foil Radiant Raiment. I really wish that these were better. A, because they're gorgeous and I just want to play with them. B, I think their effects are actually really good, but I just don't think that they're actually good. So, sit down to the pod, and I start off... I don't remember exactly what it was. It was like, I start drafting Icelander, because I force Icelander usually in that format, and then I get kicked off of Icelander, so I kind of hedge my bets between the 2 Draconic heroes. I'm like leaning Dromai. Seems like Dromai's getting cut. It wasn't that I was getting cut, it just happened to be that I was sitting downwind exactly next to the Dromai at the table. And then I get to the end of the pack, and I'm like, oh wow, I think Phi's open. Last pick out of pack 1, I get it was either a red Mounting Anger or Rise Up, the non-attack action. And I'm just like, holy shit, we're in it. Phi's open. I've never expected to see this happen. Then next pack starts, and I realize very quickly that the first 3 cards taken out of the pack by the time I'm getting a signal from the other direction were all common Phi cards were gone. Just all the commons in the back of the pack were... apparently this shot up in price. Starstruck, so I'm happy to get one of those. So yeah, I was downwind from 3 Phis. we get to the end of the draft, and I, like, you know, ask around what the pod was. Turns out that I ended up being one of 2 Icelanders, and I was downwind of the Dromai, and then there was 4 Phis in the pod, and they just were taking cursed cards for their deck. I don't know what was going on. They were just, like, passing good cards for their deck, making it seem like the deck was open because they just didn't know what to draft. So that was cursed. So that's my bad beat story. I'm happy that it's not draft first anymore, because shit like that can happen, and just, like, it's not in your control, and it's not something that you can outskill people just, like, intentionally effing up the pod. Not intentionally, but you know what I mean. Just, like, that's effed up. So yeah, getting into things that I have a problem with in drafts. For one, I really don't like how imbalanced the play draw usually feels like. In the last format, it felt like play draw was, if you went first, it was almost impossible to win some games if it was, like, pretty close power level decks. Or, God forbid, your deck is slightly worse than theirs, or just outright worse. It was such a massive percentage to your win rate going second that it felt like something needed to be changed in the design of the set to offset that. One solution I had to that, which I really wanted, was similar to Miter. I wanted a token headpiece that said, if you go first, you start the game with a Ponder token. I think that would have solved a lot of it, because then you can still throw your hand at your opponent and then get a Ponder token and maybe leak some damage. It was pretty easy to leak damage in the first round of the game for the format, but generally, if you were playing to leak damage on the first round, it meant that you didn't get an arsenal, unless your opponent just, like, didn't block shit. But a big problem that I really have with the drafting is it just feels like it's almost always correct to force, and I hate that. It's like, that's not why I draft, to just sit down and put blinders on. That being said, I am doing that for Nationals. I'm just going to blinders on draft Prism. If you're watching this, congrats, you know what I'm drafting. I don't care. I'm doing that as a bit of a social experiment, though, because, like, ooh, got a Figment of the worst Figments. Got a Tenacity. Of course I get a Figment, and it's not one of the ones I'm looking for. I mean, we'll take it. Money. So yeah, where was I? Was talking about play draw, forcing, and oh yeah, I'm going to be forcing Prism. So kind of doing that as a social experiment because, you know, I'm sure most people know me as Prism Guy, and I think that is going to have some level of impact on the pod. And that's, like, not really something I've ever seen before. Like, you look at Magic, it's not like you sit down to a pod and LSV's in your pod and you're just like, oh man, LSV's in my pod. I guess red-blue is just cut. So I'm partly doing that as, like, a social experiment because I want to see what happens if I'm just, like, pretty open about the fact that I'm forcing Prism. Is that going to change that dynamic of pods? Got a Cold Foil Shroud of Darkness. That's cool. And, like, maybe that also speaks to an issue with the design of Draft and Fab, that people can just kind of do that. Like, it's one of those things that's, like, it feels like that should be against the rules, but, like, what are you going to do about me saying on social media or something that I'm going to do something that, or force something? That's, like, surely not against the rules. But it doesn't feel like it's that punishable. But also, like, honestly, in this particular set, it feels like that's still just the correct thing to do to force Prism. And, you know, I obviously want to play Prism every draft anyways. So I want to do that for, like, fun level of I'm not going to get very many chances to play Prism anymore. I'm going to take the few that I get. But yeah, forcing, it feels like you're supposed to do that a lot of the times. A lot of these sets are designed in such a way where they support multiple of a specific hero that everyone wants to force, and then the way other things are in the set, it makes it feel like you have to pick a lane super quickly And if you're going to do that, you might as well just force off the bat. Ooh, foil flicker trick. Might keep that. Like, the way that signaling works in this is so weird, because, like, it feels like the signaling phase is over within the first couple picks, because it's not like Magic where I can be like, oh, I'm going to stay open by drafting blue and then move into something else. And I'm sure people will argue that, like, oh, you can just draft generics. And I just don't agree with that. I don't think that's correct. I think that hurts your win percentage and ends up messing up the pod, because if you're just drafting generics, you're not sending a signal of what you want to be. And then what can end up happening is then you've been sending a signal that you're not specific heroes. And once you decide that you are a hero because you think it's open to your side, you've been saying the entire draft that you're not that hero, but then you decided to move in on it. So then you're just like you're like moving in after you created one next to you. It'd be like, I see this all the time. You open Gallantry Gold, you pass Gallantry Gold. You get past a, what's it called? A Via the Vanguard, you pass a Via the Vanguard. And you're just taking generics. And then, like, a few picks later, you decide, oh, Bolton's pretty open, I'm going to move in on Bolton. But this whole draft, you've been passing Bolton cards that are insane, so the person next to you is Bolton. Because you just said, I'm not Bolton. So you just decided to move in on the deck next to someone else that is in that deck. And then there's more reasons why forcing is good. Let me think. It's hard to formulate my thoughts while opening. The number of the cards in the packs also is an issue that I have, which also promotes forcing. Like, I really wish we didn't go the other direction of cutting cards from packs and went the direction of, let's just add more. Ooh, got an Imperium Rapture. Of course, not the extended art, the one that I'm actually looking for. One day I'll open a card that I'm looking for. This is a great box. We got 2 regular legendaries, a Marvel, and an extended art Carapace. This is great. I can understand why they did that on Uprising, because you got to start the draft theoretically with 4 cards in your pool, but I just don't think that's correct most of the time. I didn't even like it in that format. I still felt like it was correct to force in that format. And it was like oh, it's correct to force because I start the game with these things in my pool. Like, I can play a Phi deck with even less cards in my... less playables because I started the game with Phoenix Flames, so I need less cards for my deck. I think the reason to not do that would be, like, you've made Fatigue too strong because they have extra cards in their deck, and I think that's just, like, a different problem that should be solved, of potentially making Fatigue worse in Limited, like maybe restricting the number of cards in deck or something. I don't know. That's probably not the correct answer. Got a Cold Foil Radiant Flow. I haven't thought too hard on that one of how to solve Fatigue in Limited, because I haven't really thought it's much of a problem. I think it's a problem in Sealed, but not in Draft, and that's the only thing I actually care about, Draft. Yeah. Number of cards. Oh yeah, the archetypes. So that was like a thing that I really enjoyed in Magic. I guess I already touched on that one, really. I don't think I have anything else to say on that. Like, I want more archetypes in the set of things that I can draft. Like, we almost got there with Uprising on Dromai. I felt like you could have someone that was playing dragons and someone that was playing just attack actions. Kinda had the idea of that in Tales, where it's like, oh, I'm the Earth Briar, you can be the Lightning Briar, and like that kind of thing with the element system. But in reality, the way that format would play out a lot of times, it would just be, there's 3 to 4 Briars at the table. We're just taking any playable card for the deck because we're all fighting over just having enough cards in our deck. Because there's too many of us at the table. Because, you know, forcing. Who knew? Forcing would mess up pods. Yeah, I would love to see more of that, where, again, it's the, like, we're fighting over different cards. And that was, like, one of my favorite things in Magic to do. I'd always draft the, like, wacky archetypes and stuff. Anyone that's, like, knows me in person and talked to me about draft things has probably heard this one before, but my favorite draft archetype that I've ever drafted was back in Ravnica Allegiance. It's ironic that I have such problems with fatigue, but this is a fatigue deck, but I have an issues with fatigue decks in Fab specifically, for other reasons. I think it's more fine in Magic, because that's usually not a very good strategy. But the deck was basically a blue-white control deck. Now, blue-white in that particular draft format was a blue-white Flyers archetype, not a blue-white control deck. You had a couple control cards, but the archetype really wasn't a control deck. There was a card in the set called Clear the Mind. It was a sorcery that was 2 and a blue. You would target a player, and that player would shuffle all cards in their graveyard back into their deck, and then the caster of the card would draw a card. So what you would do is you draft 2 of these. It did not exile after playing it, so when you play 1 copy of it, it would shuffle back in the first copy. So I play it, I put this in my graveyard. When I see my second one, I shuffle the first back in. And every time you do that, you have thinned lands out of your deck and increase the threat density of your deck, because the more percentage of your deck is spells, not lands. And the rest of your deck would just be removal spells. It'd be a lot of pacifisms and stuff. And ideally you'd have a copy of that Dovin's card, that the enchantment that entered the battlefield, and you'd gain life and draw a card, and you get to return it to your hand when you play, I think, a instant on your own turn or something like that, or on your main phase. So you'd have a value engine that kept you in the game, and you just deck your opponent out by running them out of threats. That was an archetype I really liked, because no one ever drafted it. It was just always open. The blue-white players didn't want any of the cards for this deck, so you just got all of them. Nobody wanted Clear the Mind. That was a card that you pick up last pick out of pack, so you get all of them. I mean, you only want 2, but the fact that you guaranteed got them pretty much was nice. And another example of that was in War of the Spark. I really liked drafting green-black Wooburg, because no one really cared about the green-black stuff, so you'd get all of it. And then the way that format worked is the rares were very bomby, but then if you weren't those colors, you just couldn't play the rares, so you'd have to pass them. And if you're a Wooburg deck, you just pick up all the rares that people are passing and just jam them in your deck and play them. So you could end up having a very high power level deck, because you'd have 5 to 6 rares in your deck. Just things like that of oh, no one else sees this at the table, I'll draft this because it's a niche archetype and I have knowledge of the format that other people don't, so I can leverage my draft knowledge over other people at the table. And it felt like I couldn't really do that in Fab so far. I think Yellow Bellow was the closest we've really gotten to that, of just this niche Rhinar deck. But yeah, these are some of my problems with draft. I could probably ramble on more about this, but I've already taken up enough of your time, and I can see that my phone battery is about to die. So thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any thoughts on draft, I'd love to hear them down below. Things that you don't like, things that you do like, things that you'd like to see in the future of draft in Fab. I'd love to hear your opinions down below. Maybe I'll make a bigger video about draft in Fab, but if that's something you guys want to see, please let me know. And as always, thank you so much for watching.